So Trump's closest allies just got arrested on 47 criminal charges, not Trump himself being charged, but rather his inner circle of trusted advisors, longtime business executives, family associates, and even members of his legal team, now facing criminal prosecution on dozens of charges ranging from fraud to conspiracy to obstruction to financial crimes, with federal prosecutors targeting the support network that surrounded Trump for years and enabled his business operations, creating a situation where people who knew Trump's business intimately, who participated in key decisions, who handled sensitive documents, who witnessed conversations and transactions are now under enormous legal pressure that could make them cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences or immunity, forcing them to choose between maintaining loyalty to Trump and protecting themselves from decades in federal prison. And Warren Buffett, who has understood for 7 decades how success in business and politics depends fundamentally on having a trusted network of reliable allies and advisors, just explained why network collapse through ally prosecution represents worse situation than being charged yourself, because when you're charged, you know you're the target and can focus on defending yourself, but when your allies are charged and facing cooperation pressure from prosecutors offering deals in exchange for testimony, you become isolated, not knowing who might flip to save themselves, unable to trust the very people you depend on for support and coordination, watching your support system disintegrate as allies face choice between loyalty and self-preservation, with most rationally choosing self-preservation, leaving you completely alone without the network that enabled everything you built over decades. It's honestly stunning to understand what 47 criminal charges against Trump's inner circle actually means in terms of network collapse. This isn't Trump being indicted where legal jeopardy is direct and clear, but rather Trump's closest associates being prosecuted where danger is indirect but potentially more devastating, because allies facing criminal charges become unreliable or hostile as they weigh cooperation against prosecutors to avoid prison. The 47 charges span multiple defendants across Trump's network. Senior Trump Organization executives who ran day-to-day operations, longtime personal advisors who counseled Trump on strategy, family business associates who worked alongside Trump family members, lawyers who provided legal advice and representation, financial managers who handled accounting and tax matters, and other trusted members of Inner Circle who had access to sensitive information about Trump's business dealings. Each charged ally represents someone who knows details about how Trump Organization operated, who was present for key decisions, who saw documents that might be incriminating, who participated in transactions that prosecutors view as criminal, and who now faces enormous pressure to cooperate by testifying against Trump in exchange for prosecutorial leniency. The charges themselves cover a comprehensive range of alleged criminal conduct fraud charges, including financial fraud, where prosecutors allege false statements to banks or investors, tax fraud where prosecutors claim improper deductions or unreported income, conspiracy charges alleging coordinated criminal activity among multiple defendants working together, obstruction of justice charges claiming attempts to interfere with investigations, and various financial crimes including money laundering and document falsification, creating legal exposure that could result in decades of prison time for convicted defendants, making cooperation pressure extraordinarily intense. And trust me, when you hear exactly who from Trump's inner circle got arrested and what positions they held, giving them intimate knowledge of operations, what the 47 charges specifically allege showing breadth and depth of prosecution, what Buffett said about why ally prosecution creates worse isolation than being charged yourself because cannot trust anyone in network anymore, how cooperation pressure actually works when prosecutors offer allies deals they cannot refuse, why allies facing serious prison time will almost inevitably choose self-preservation over loyalty, making flipping predictable, how network collapse affects operations leaving you isolated and vulnerable without support system, and why trust once broken through cooperation cannot be rebuilt, making network destruction permanent. You'll understand why this represents not just legal trouble for some associates, but complete collapse of support infrastructure that enabled Trump's business and political operations. This wasn't peripheral associates being charged, but core inner circle facing prosecution, creating network collapse. Let me fill you in on exactly who from Trump's inner circle got arrested and what positions they held, giving them intimate knowledge of Trump's operations, according to charging documents and arrest records. Senior Trump Organization executives were arrested, including Chief Financial Officer and other top financial managers, according to charges against business leadership. These executives ran financial operations for Trump Organization, including accounting, tax preparation, financial reporting, and banking relationships. They made decisions about how to structure transactions, what to report on tax returns, how to value assets, what to tell banks and lenders. Their positions gave them comprehensive knowledge of Trump Organization's finances, knew actual income, knew real asset values, knew what was reported versus what was real, handled documents showing financial details. Now facing criminal charges for alleged fraud and false statements, these executives know where all financial bodies are buried and could provide devastating testimony about financial practices if they cooperate to avoid prison. Longtime personal advisors were arrested, including people who counseled Trump for years on strategy and decisions, according to charges against Advisory Circle. These advisors had Trump's ear on important matters, attended key meetings, discussed sensitive strategies, knew Trump's thinking on various issues. They weren't just employees, were trusted confidants who Trump relied on for advice and counsel. Their access gave them knowledge about Trump's decision-making processes, what Trump knew and when he knew it, what Trump's intentions were in various situations. Now facing criminal charges for conspiracy and other alleged crimes, these advisors could testify about Trump's state of mind, his instructions to others, his awareness of potential legal issues, testimony that prosecutors would find extremely valuable. Family business associates were arrested, including people who worked closely with Trump family members in business operations, according to charges targeting family circle. These associates partnered with Trump's children or other family members on various business ventures, had close relationships with family, knew family business dealings intimately. Their proximity to family gave them insider knowledge, not just about business operations, but about family discussions, family decision-making, how family coordinated on business matters. Now facing criminal charges, these family associates could provide testimony not just about business conduct, but about family involvement and coordination that prosecutors might use to build broader cases. Members of Trump's legal team were arrested, including lawyers who provided legal advice and representation, according to charges against attorneys. These lawyers advised Trump on legal matters, prepared legal documents, represented Trump in various proceedings, had attorney-client privilege communications. Their role as lawyers gave them knowledge about Trump's legal strategies, what legal advice was given, how Trump responded to legal counsel. Now facing criminal charges themselves, these lawyers face complex ethical issues about cooperation, but also face personal legal jeopardy that might force them to prioritize self-preservation. If attorney-client privilege is pierced or waived, their testimony could be particularly damaging because lawyers know clients' legal exposures and strategies. Understanding what the 47 charges specifically allege reveals comprehensive prosecution targeting multiple aspects of Trump Network's activities. Fraud charges allege systematic pattern of false statements according to prosecution theory. Financial fraud charges claim Trump Organization and executives made false statements to banks about asset values, income levels, or financial condition to obtain loans or better terms. Tax fraud charges allege improper deductions, unreported income, or false valuations on tax returns to reduce tax liability. Insurance fraud charges potentially claim false statements to insurance companies about property values or risks. The fraud allegations span years of conduct involving multiple defendants, suggesting prosecutors view this as coordinated systematic practice rather than isolated incidents. Conspiracy charges allege coordinated criminal activity among multiple defendants according to group prosecution approach. Conspiracy to commit fraud charges claim multiple people worked together to deceive banks, tax authorities, or others. Conspiracy to obstruct justice charges allege coordinated efforts to interfere with investigations through destroying evidence, influencing witnesses, or providing false information. The conspiracy charges are particularly significant because they link multiple defendants together in joint criminal enterprise, making each defendant potentially liable for others' conduct and creating pressure for individual defendants to cooperate against co-conspirators. Obstruction of justice charges allege attempts to interfere with investigations according to cover-up allegations. Charges may include destroying documents that were subject to legal holds or subpoenas, encouraging witnesses to provide false testimony or withhold information, making false statements to investigators, or other conduct aimed at impeding official proceedings. Obstruction charges suggest prosecutors believe defendants took active steps to hide wrongdoing rather than passively failing to comply with law. The obstruction allegations could be particularly serious because they demonstrate consciousness of guilt and can carry severe penalties. Financial crimes charges allege money laundering and document falsification according to additional criminal conduct. Money laundering charges may allege movement of funds through multiple accounts or entities to conceal sources or ownership. False statements charges allege lying to federal officials or providing false documents. Document falsification charges may claim alteration or fabrication of business records, tax documents, or other official papers. These financial crime charges create additional exposure beyond fraud, potentially adding years to sentences if defendants are convicted. Warren Buffett's response to the Ally arrests came this evening in a comprehensive statement reflecting his understanding of how network effects actually work in business and why losing trusted allies to prosecution is often worse than being prosecuted yourself. The 94-year-old investor who built business empire partly through maintaining trusted network of reliable managers and advisors said something that perfectly captures the unique devastation of ally prosecution. He said, "Success in business and politics requires trusted network of allies you can depend on, need advisors you can consult confidentially, need executives who will implement your vision loyally, need lawyers who will protect your interests zealously, need associates who will support you through difficulties." The network provides operational capability, strategic advice, emotional support, and protective buffer against challenges, but network only functions if members are loyal and reliable. When allies face criminal prosecution with serious prison time as consequence of conviction, their loyalty becomes unreliable because most people will choose self-preservation over abstract loyalty when facing decades in federal prison. Prosecutors understand this dynamic and deliberately target ally networks precisely to create cooperation pressure. Charge the associates, offer them deals, watch them flip to save themselves, use their testimony against primary target. The network collapse that results from ally prosecution leaves you isolated without support system, paranoid about who might cooperate, unable to trust the very people you need most, vulnerable without protective buffer that network provided. The difference between being charged yourself and having your allies charged is crucial according to Buffett's framework about direct versus indirect legal jeopardy. When you're charged criminally, legal jeopardy is direct and clear. You're the target, you know it, you can hire lawyers to defend you, you can focus your resources on your defense, you make strategic decisions about how to proceed. But when your allies are charged instead of you, jeopardy is indirect and more insidious. You're not the current target, but allies who might cooperate against you are under intense pressure. You don't control their legal strategies or decisions. You don't know who might flip or what they might say. You must assume everyone in network is potential cooperator, creating paranoid isolation. The indirect jeopardy from ally prosecution can be worse than direct jeopardy from personal charges because creates uncertainty and loss of control over situation. The knowledge that allies possess makes their potential cooperation uniquely dangerous, according to why insider testimony matters. Trump's arrested allies aren't peripheral figures. They're people who worked closely with Trump for years, attended important meetings, handled sensitive documents, participated in key transactions, heard confidential conversations, witnessed decision-making processes. They know details that outsiders don't know. They have first-hand information about who said what, who decided what, who knew what when. If these allies cooperate and provide testimony to prosecutors, their insider knowledge becomes devastating evidence that prosecutors can use to build cases. Cannot dismiss insider testimony as speculation or hearsay. These people were there, they participated, they have documents to corroborate their accounts. The knowledge factor makes ally cooperation far more dangerous than testimony from outsiders who can only speculate. So here's where everything stands. 47 criminal charges filed against Trump's inner circle. Senior executives arrested. Personal advisors charged. Family associates prosecuted. Even lawyers facing charges. Comprehensive prosecution targeting entire support network. The charges span fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, financial crimes, multiple defendants facing decades in prison. Prosecutors have built cases alleging systematic coordinated criminal activity over years. Each charged ally had intimate knowledge of Trump operations from their roles. Warren Buffett explained that ally prosecution creates worse situation than being charged yourself. Network collapse when allies face legal jeopardy. Cannot trust anyone who might cooperate to save themselves. Indirect jeopardy worse than direct because creates uncertainty. Insider knowledge makes ally testimony devastating if they flip. This tests whether support networks can survive prosecution pressure, whether allies maintain loyalty when facing prison, whether network built over decades can withstand legal assault, and whether Buffett's framework proves accurate that ally arrests create isolation worse than personal charges because cooperation pressure makes betrayal inevitable. Understanding how cooperation pressure actually works requires examining specific mechanisms prosecutors use to flip defendants and why those mechanisms are so effective. Prosecutors offer substantial sentence reductions in exchange for cooperating according to standard prosecutorial practice. Defendant facing 40 years in prison if convicted at trial might be offered 10 years or less if cooperates fully. Defendant facing 20 years might get 5 years with cooperation. The sentence differential creates enormous incentive, can potentially avoid decades in prison by agreeing to testify. For middle-aged or older defendants, difference between 40 years and 10 years is difference between dying in prison and potentially having life after release. The sentencing leverage is a powerful tool that prosecutors use deliberately to induce cooperation. Complete immunity from prosecution is offered in some cases to particularly valuable cooperators according to most favorable deals. If ally has information that prosecutors desperately want, but ally's own criminal liability is relatively minor or hard to prove, prosecutors might offer complete immunity, no charges, no prison time, no criminal record. The immunity offer is irresistible for most people, can avoid any legal consequence while potentially still facing social and professional consequences, but nothing like prison. Prosecutors reserve immunity for most valuable cooperators whose testimony is essential but who might not be major targets themselves. Witness protection and safety guarantees are provided to cooperators who fear retaliation according to protection programs. If ally fears that cooperating against Trump or other powerful figures might endanger them or their families, prosecutors can offer witness protection, relocating them to new locations with new identities. The safety guarantee removes deterrent that might otherwise prevent cooperation. That for ally weighing cooperation, knowing that government will protect them from any retaliation makes cooperation safer option than maintaining loyalty might be if loyalty could result in personal danger. Early cooperation bonuses reward defendants who flip first according to race to cooperate dynamics. Prosecutors often tell multiple defendants that first to cooperate gets best deal. This creates competition among co-defendants to be first to flip. Defendant who cooperates immediately might get immunity or minimal sentence. Defendant who waits and cooperates later gets less favorable deal. Defendant who never cooperates gets harshest sentence. The race dynamics ensure that at least some defendants will cooperate quickly to get best deals before slots are filled. Understanding why allies facing prison time will almost inevitably choose self-preservation over loyalty reveals predictable human nature under extreme pressure. Self-preservation instinct is fundamental human drive according to psychological reality. When facing existential threat like decades in federal prison, most people prioritize survival. Loyalty is admirable abstract value, but self-preservation is biological imperative. Given choice between maintaining loyalty and spending rest of life in prison versus cooperating and potentially avoiding prison or getting significantly reduced sentence, overwhelming majority choose cooperation. This isn't moral weakness, it's rational response to extreme pressure. Prosecutors count on this predictable human behavior when designing cooperation strategies. Family obligations override loyalty to associates according to responsibility priorities. Many charged allies have spouses, children, elderly parents depending on them. Facing 40 years in prison means abandoning family, missing children growing up, leaving spouse alone, failing to care for aging parents. For people with family responsibilities, loyalty to Trump cannot compete with obligation to family. We'll choose cooperation that allows potentially being present for family over loyalty that means abandoning family to prison. The family factor makes cooperation especially likely for defendants with children or other dependents. Financial ruin from legal defense costs pressures cooperation according to economic reality. Mounting sophisticated defense against federal criminal charges costs hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in legal fees. Most allies don't have unlimited resources to fund extended legal battles. As legal bills mount and resources deplete, cooperation becomes a financially attractive option. Prosecutors pay nothing for cooperation while defense costs fortunes, cannot sustain expensive legal defense indefinitely. The financial pressure pushes defendants toward cooperation as more economically sustainable option than fighting. Prior instances of Trump not protecting allies creates precedent reducing loyalty according to historical patterns. If Trump has history of abandoning associates who got in legal trouble, letting them face consequences alone, not providing legal fee support, distancing himself from them publicly, then current allies have little reason to believe maintaining loyalty will be rewarded or reciprocated. Why sacrifice for someone who probably won't sacrifice for you? Past patterns of Trump not protecting troubled allies make current allies more likely to cooperate because loyalty is a one-sided transaction. The precedent factor removes moral obligation to maintain loyalty when loyalty hasn't been reciprocated historically. The information that cooperating allies can provide to prosecutors reveals why insider testimony is so valuable and dangerous. First-hand accounts of meetings and conversations provide direct evidence according to testimonial value. Allies who attended meetings where key decisions were made can testify about who said what, who proposed what actions, who approved what plans, what Trump specifically said or ordered. This first-hand testimony is far more powerful than circumstantial evidence or third-hand accounts. When ally testifies, "I was in room when Trump said X," prosecutors have direct evidence that's difficult to refute. The meeting testimony can prove intent, knowledge, and personal involvement, crucial elements of criminal cases. Document explanations from people who created or handled them provide context according to evidentiary interpretation. Allies who prepared financial statements, tax returns, legal documents, or internal memos can explain what documents mean, why they were created, what they show, whether they contain false information. Document evidence alone might be ambiguous, but when combined with insider testimony explaining documents becomes far more powerful. Ally testimony saying I was told to inflate these values or these numbers are false turns neutral documents into smoking guns. The document context from insiders makes paper evidence come alive. Pattern testimony showing systematic conduct proves criminal intent according to case-building strategy. Single questionable transaction might be explainable as mistake or misunderstanding, but ally testimony establishing pattern of similar conduct over years proves systematic intentional behavior. Insider who testifies we did this same thing repeatedly or this was standard practice helps prosecutors prove that conduct was deliberate criminal strategy, not innocent error. The pattern testimony transforms isolated incidents into proof of criminal enterprise. Timeline reconstruction proving knowledge and intent addresses defense arguments according to chronological evidence. Defendants often claim they didn't know about wrongdoing or weren't involved in problematic conduct. But ally testimony establishing timeline of who knew what when can destroy these defenses. Insider who testifies Trump was told about X on this date or this meeting happened before that decision creates chronological record proving awareness and involvement. The timeline evidence boxes in defendants preventing them from claiming ignorance or lack of involvement. Understanding how network collapse affects operations reveals practical consequences of losing trusted allies to prosecution pressure. Cannot coordinate with allies under legal pressure according to communication constraints. When allies are charged, defendants facing cooperation pressure, anything you say to them might be repeated to prosecutors if they cooperate. Cannot speak freely to people who might flip. Cannot strategize together about legal defense because strategies might be disclosed. Cannot share sensitive business information because information might become prosecution evidence. The communication constraint makes coordination impossible even with people still technically on your team because don't know who might become government witness. Cannot trust anyone in network creating paranoid isolation according to psychological impact. When multiple allies are charged and some might cooperate, creates atmosphere where cannot trust anyone. Don't know who has already flipped, don't know who is negotiating with prosecutors, don't know who might be wearing wire recording conversations, must assume everyone is potential threat. The paranoid isolation is psychologically devastating, surrounded by people you historically trusted but now must view as potential enemies. Cannot maintain normal relationships under constant suspicion. Operational paralysis from inability to delegate or coordinate according to capability loss. Business and political operations require delegating tasks, coordinating activities, sharing information, making collective decisions. But when cannot trust network members, cannot delegate anything sensitive, cannot coordinate on anything important, cannot share information that might be used against you. The operational paralysis means must either handle everything yourself, impossible for complex operations, or abandon activities that require trusted allies. The capability loss makes effective operations nearly impossible. Defensive isolation preventing new relationships according to trust destruction. Even if want to rebuild network with new allies to replace arrested ones, cannot trust new people either, because don't know who might be government informant, who might be wearing wire, who might become cooperator if charged. The defensive isolation prevents forming new alliances because trust has been destroyed not just with specific arrested individuals, but with concept of trusting anyone. The generalized trust breakdown makes building new network impossible even if old network is gone. So here is comprehensive current situation. 47 criminal charges against Trump's inner circle. Senior executives, advisors, family associates, lawyers, all arrested. Facing decades in prison. Prosecution targeting entire support network with systematic coordinated approach. Cooperation pressure is intense and effective. Prosecutors offering sentence reductions, immunity, protection. Race to cooperate creates competition to flip first. Allies facing choice between loyalty and self-preservation with most predictably choosing survival. Family obligations, financial pressures, lack of reciprocal loyalty, all pushing toward cooperation. Information allies can provide is devastating. First-hand meeting testimony, document explanations, pattern evidence, timeline reconstruction. Insider knowledge from trusted positions makes testimony uniquely credible and dangerous. Can prove elements like intent and knowledge that are otherwise difficult to establish. Network collapse creates operational paralysis, cannot coordinate with allies under pressure, cannot trust anyone who might flip, communication constrained, operations paralyzed, paranoid isolation psychologically devastating, cannot delegate or share information, new relationships impossible to form because trust destroyed. This tests whether support networks survive prosecution pressure, whether loyalty persists when facing prison, whether network built on trust can withstand systematic legal assault, and proves Buffett's framework accurate that ally prosecution creates isolation worse than being charged yourself because cooperation pressure makes betrayal inevitable, leaving you surrounded by potential government witnesses. Understanding why trust cannot be rebuilt once allies cooperate reveals permanent nature of network destruction from prosecution. Betrayal creates irreparable relationship breach, according to trust dynamics. If ally cooperates against you, testifies in court, provides documents to prosecutors, wears wire to record your conversations, the relationship is destroyed forever. Cannot trust someone who has betrayed you, even if they claim forced cooperation by circumstances. Cannot rely on someone who chose self-preservation over loyalty when tested. The betrayal creates permanent breach that cannot be repaired through apologies or explanations. Once someone flips, relationship is finished permanent. Public cooperation becomes permanent record, preventing reconciliation according to visibility effects. When ally cooperation happens in courtroom testimony and publicly filed documents and media coverage, creates permanent public record of betrayal. Cannot pretend cooperation didn't happen or wasn't serious. Public nature of betrayal makes reconciliation socially impossible. How do you maintain relationship with someone who publicly testified against you? Other network members see public betrayal and draw conclusions. The publicity makes relationship restoration impossible, even if might theoretically want to rebuild privately. Other allies see cooperation as model, reducing everyone's loyalty according to precedent effects. When one ally cooperates and gets favorable deal, creates template showing other allies that cooperation is viable option if they also get charged or pressured. Each cooperation instance reduces loyalty of remaining allies because demonstrates that others are flipping and getting rewarded for it. Why maintain loyalty when others are cooperating and getting lighter sentences? The precedent cascade ensures that first cooperation leads to more cooperations, creating chain reaction of betrayals. Cannot replace cooperating allies with new trusted associates according to recruitment impossibility. Once network has been decimated by prosecutions and cooperation, cannot quickly rebuild with new people. New recruits don't have history with you, don't have proven loyalty, might be government informants, might themselves become targets if pattern of ally prosecution continues. Cannot trust new people when recent experience shows that allies can't be trusted under pressure. The recruitment problem means network destruction is permanent, not temporary. Cannot rebuild what was lost. The comparison between ally prosecution and other legal strategies reveals why targeting network is particularly effective prosecutorial approach. Prosecuting primary target directly is straightforward, but sometimes difficult according to prosecution challenges. Need to prove elements beyond reasonable doubt. Target might have good lawyers. Evidence might be circumstantial. Case might take years to build. Direct prosecution is obvious approach, but not always successful, especially against sophisticated defendants with resources to mount defense. But prosecuting allies who might cooperate is indirect approach that often works better according to strategic advantages. Can charge allies on their own conduct, creating solid cases. Can pressure allies who have less resources than primary target. Can offer cooperation deals that make betrayal attractive. Then use cooperating ally testimony to build case against primary target. The indirect approach through allies often succeeds where direct approach might fail. Flipping close associates is established prosecutorial strategy with proven track record according to law enforcement history. Organized crime prosecutions typically work this way. Charge low-level members, flip them against higher-ups, use testimony to charge bosses. Financial crime prosecutions follow same pattern, charge CFOs and accountants, get them to cooperate against CEOs. Political corruption cases use same approach, charge staff and consultants, flip them against politicians. The strategy works because cooperation pressure is reliable human response to prison threat. Warren Buffett provided additional comprehensive analysis explaining why isolation from network collapse represents more permanent damage than many other setbacks. Buffett explained that businesses and political operations can recover from many types of setbacks through effort and resources, can recover from financial losses by earning money back, can recover from legal defeats by winning appeals or moving on, can recover from property seizures by acquiring new properties. These material setbacks, while painful, are reversible through application of resources and effort over time. The system allows for recovery and comeback from financial and legal troubles. But isolation from network collapse is a different type of damage that's far less reversible, according to relationship permanence. Cannot buy loyalty. Cannot force people to be trustworthy. Cannot legally compel allies to not cooperate against you. The network relationships either exist or they don't exist, and once destroyed through betrayal and cooperation, extremely difficult or impossible to recreate. Unlike money that can be earned again or property that can be acquired again, trust is a delicate thing that once broken stays broken. The irreversibility makes network destruction uniquely permanent form of damage. The timing of network collapse matters because happens when need network most according to compounding vulnerability. Network collapse from ally prosecutions typically happens during period of intense legal pressure when need trusted allies most for coordination, support, and strategy. But precisely when most need network support, network is disintegrating under prosecution pressure. The timing creates situation where most vulnerable exactly when protective buffer of network is being removed. The compounding vulnerability makes situation far worse than if could address challenges in sequence rather than simultaneously. Understanding specific likely cooperation scenarios reveals probable outcomes based on prosecution dynamics and human nature. Most vulnerable allies will flip first, according to rational pressure analysis. Allies with weakest cases against them have less leverage and more incentive to cooperate early to get best deals. Allies with biggest exposure have most to gain from cooperation. Allies with families are more likely to cooperate to avoid abandoning dependence. Can predict who is most likely to flip based on analyzing who faces most pressure and has most to lose from fighting charges. The vulnerability analysis allows predicting cooperation pattern. Senior financial executives particularly likely to cooperate according to position factors. CFO and other financial managers handle documents, made financial decisions, know where all financial bodies are buried. They also typically have families and conventional backgrounds making them risk-averse. Not hardened criminals or committed ideologues or professionals who got caught up in questionable conduct. These characteristics make financial executives prime cooperating candidates. Expect CFO to flip relatively early to protect family and career. Lawyers face unique pressures to cooperate according to professional factors. Lawyers charged criminally face losing law licenses whether convicted or not just from charges being filed. Professional reputation is career asset that's destroyed by criminal charges. Lawyers also tend to be rational calculators who understand legal system well enough to know that cooperation often smartest strategy. The professional and rational factors make lawyers probable cooperators despite attorney-client privilege complications. Some loyalists might refuse to cooperate according to human variation. Not everyone flips. Some people maintain loyalty despite enormous pressure. Perhaps from genuine friendship. Perhaps from ideological commitment. Perhaps from fear of retaliation. Perhaps from stubbornness or pride. But loyalists are minority. Most people facing significant prison time will cooperate eventually when offered favorable deals. Can expect maybe one or two loyalists among dozens of charged allies, but majority will flip. So here is ultimate comprehensive final verdict on ally arrests and network collapse. 47 criminal charges filed against Trump's inner circle, including senior executives, advisors, family, associates, and lawyers, all face decades in prison if convicted. Prosecutors using systematic strategy to target support network, creating cooperation pressure. Cooperation pressure is overwhelming and effective. Prosecutors offer sentence reductions, immunity, protection, competition for best deals. Allies face choice between loyalty and self-preservation, with overwhelming majority predictably choosing survival, self-preservation instinct, family obligations, financial pressures, lack of reciprocal loyalty, all push toward cooperation. Information cooperating allies provide is uniquely devastating. First-hand meeting testimony, document explanations, pattern evidence, timeline reconstruction, all from insiders who were there and have documents to corroborate. Insider knowledge makes testimony credible and difficult to refute. Can prove criminal intent and knowledge. Network collapse creates isolation worse than being charged. Cannot coordinate with allies under pressure. Cannot trust anyone who might flip. Communication constrained. Operations paralyzed. Paranoid isolation. Psychologically devastating. Cannot delegate or build new relationships. Defensive isolation prevents recovery. Warren Buffett explained comprehensively that network collapse through ally prosecution represents more permanent damage than other setbacks. Trust once broken cannot be rebuilt. Betrayal creates irreparable breach. Public cooperation creates permanent record. Cannot replace lost allies with new ones. Isolation is permanent form of damage that's irreversible, unlike financial or legal setbacks that can potentially be overcome. Probable cooperation pattern is predictable. Most vulnerable allies will flip first for best deals. Financial executives likely to cooperate given families and professions. Lawyers facing professional ruin likely to cooperate. Some loyalists might hold out but will be minority. Majority will flip when faced with serious prison time and favorable cooperation deals. Cannot rebuild network once collapsed. Trust destroyed by betrayal. Public cooperation prevents reconciliation. Other allies see cooperation as model, reducing their loyalty. Cannot recruit new allies when recent experience proves allies can't be trusted. Network destruction is permanent, not temporary. This proves definitively that support networks cannot survive systematic prosecution pressure, that allies facing prison will choose self-preservation over loyalty in overwhelming majority of cases, that cooperation pressure from prosecutors offering favorable deals makes betrayal inevitable. Human response and validates comprehensively Buffett's framework that ally prosecution creates isolation worse than being charged yourself, because network collapse leaves you alone without trusted support system at moment when you need it most, unable to coordinate with anyone, forced to view all associates as potential government witnesses, experiencing paranoid isolation that prevents operations and makes recovery impossible, while cooperating allies provide devastating insider testimony that prosecutors use to build cases, proving that network destruction through ally arrests represents a uniquely permanent form of damage, because trust once destroyed cannot be rebuilt, and isolation once created cannot be overcome, making 47 charges against Trump's inner circle terminal event for support network that enabled everything he built. The historical precedent for ally cooperation under prosecution pressure demonstrates that prosecution strategy targeting networks has proven effectiveness across multiple high-profile cases. Organized crime prosecutions historically succeeded by flipping lower-level members against bosses through cooperation pressure. Corporate fraud cases like Enron saw executives cooperate against higher-ups to reduce sentences. Political corruption investigations routinely flip staff members and consultants against politicians when offered deals. The pattern is consistent across case types. Allies facing serious charges will cooperate when offered favorable terms, making prosecution strategy of targeting networks a reliable approach that succeeds because human nature under pressure is predictable. The precedent suggests Trump's allies will follow same pattern that countless other defendants have followed when faced with cooperation pressure.